If you're retired or planning to retire soon, here's the truth about $1 million. For some people, it's more than enough. For others, it's nowhere close. The difference isn't market returns, it's how much of that million you can actually live on. Most millionaires aren't really millionaires, at least not once you remove the value of their home. On paper, they look like they've made it. Nice house, solid net worth, 7 figures if you check the right box on a spreadsheet. But subtract the home equity and suddenly the picture changes. Milo Monkey tilts his head, scratching his chin. And this is where things get uncomfortable, because what we call being a millionaire isn't always what people think it is. Let's start with the definition. A millionaire is someone whose net worth adds up to $1 million or more. That means everything they own that has value, real estate, cars, businesses, investments, collectibles, minus everything they owe, assets minus liabilities. Simple math. Milo Monkey raises an eyebrow at the numbers. Now, some people like to argue with this definition. They'll say things like, well, you'd have to sell that, or that's not liquid, so it shouldn't count. But that's not how net worth works. Net worth doesn't care how easy something is to sell. It only cares that it has value. Milo Monkey shrugs, as if saying, yep, math doesn't lie. What those people are actually talking about is something different, what's called an investable asset millionaire. That's someone with at least $1 million in liquid investable assets, money that can be accessed, invested, or used without selling your house or uprooting your life. We're talking about cash, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, retirement accounts, assets that can realistically support you. Milo Monkey gives a little nod, impressed. Once you separate those two definitions, the numbers change dramatically. According to recent data, roughly 24 million people in the United States have a net worth of $1 million or more. That sounds huge, about 7% of the population. But here's the catch. That number includes home equity. Milo Monkey taps his temple. Ah, tricky. Once you remove the value of people's homes and focus only on liquid investable wealth, the group shrinks fast, very fast. Only about 2 to 3% of adults actually have $1 million or more in investable assets. That's closer to 6 million people total. In other words, the vast majority of millionaires are only hitting that number because of their house, not because they have $1 million growing in a portfolio, not because they have financial independence, just because real estate values went up. Milo Monkey leans back and smirks. House rich, wallet less so. That doesn't mean owning a home is bad. Far from it. Building equity takes time, discipline, and stability. It's an achievement. But here's the problem. Home equity isn't usable money. You can't easily spend it. You can't live off it. And you can't rely on it without selling, borrowing, or restructuring your entire life. It's wealth on paper, not wealth in your pocket. This is where the difference between looking rich and being financially free becomes crystal clear. Imagine a couple in their 60s. They own a $750,000 home outright and have $250,000 in savings. On paper, they're millionaires. In reality, they're still dependent on income, still budgeting carefully, still worried about health care, repairs, and rising costs. Now imagine someone renting an apartment with no property but $900,000 invested and $100,000 in cash. Same net worth, completely different life. One has equity, the other has freedom. Technically, both are millionaires, but only one can realistically stop working. And that's the distinction most people miss. Milo Monkey leans in. Spot the difference yet? Net worth tells you what someone owns. Investable assets tell you what someone can live on. Once you see that difference, you start to realize why so many people who made it still feel stuck. Because when most of your wealth is tied up in your home, you're not wealthy in a practical sense. You're anchored. This becomes painfully obvious in retirement. Millions of people retire with net worths over $1 million and still struggle financially. Why? Because most of that wealth is locked inside a house that doesn't generate income. On paper, they look secure. In real life, they're watching every dollar.
And that's where the conversation really needs to go next. Once you understand who actually counts as a millionaire without counting their home, the way you think about money changes completely. A lot of people reach retirement age with what looks like a strong net worth, $1 million or more, and still feel financially fragile. The reason is simple. Most of that wealth is locked inside their home. They're living off modest pensions, Social Security, or a small pool of savings while owning a high-value property that quietly drains cash. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, none of that shows up in a net worth headline, but it shows up every month. You'll often see older homeowners living in houses that need work, not because they don't care, but because equity doesn't pay bills until you turn it into cash. And yes, they do have options. They can downsize, they can refinance, they can take a reverse mortgage, they can sell and rent. Equity gives flexibility, but here's the key point. All of those options require action. They require change. They require converting the house into money. Until then, equity is not spending power, it's potential. Now compare that to someone who quietly spent decades investing, maxing out retirement accounts, buying index funds, reinvesting dividends, building assets designed to produce income. They may not own a home, they may rent, but their money works for them every day. Milo Monkey nods proudly. That's the real power move. That's why communities focused on financial independence care far less about total net worth and far more about liquid net worth and passive income. The real question isn't how much are you worth on paper, it's how long can you live without a paycheck. Someone might own a business valued at over $1 million. On paper, they're wealthy, but if the business can't be easily sold and they only have a few $100,000 in liquid assets, they're still dependent on that business continuing to run. Another person might have no business, no house, but a well-structured portfolio that quietly pays their bills. One looks impressive, the other is free. The rise in home prices over the last decade has created a lot of accidental millionaires, especially in certain regions. People who bought modest homes years ago suddenly crossed the seven-figure mark without changing anything. But that doesn't automatically mean financial security. In many cases, it creates the opposite. People who are asset-rich but cash-poor, still working, still stressed, still stuck, despite what their Zestimate says. Milo Monkey throws his hands up. Surprise, not so rich after all. The mistake happens when people start treating home equity like accessible money. It isn't. A house is a place to live. It can be a powerful part of your net worth, but it's not a replacement for liquid income-producing assets. You can't pay medical bills with drywall. You can't buy groceries with square footage, and you can't retire comfortably on appreciation alone. Real financial stability comes from balance, owning a home and building liquid assets, equity and income, security and flexibility. Without that balance, people end up house rich and life poor, wealthy on paper, constrained in reality. How many people are actually millionaires without counting their home? Not many. Roughly 2 out of every 200 adults, and chances are you wouldn't recognize them. They're not loud, they're not flashy, they're just quietly building assets that give them options. Milo Monkey quietly sips a banana smoothie, watching the numbers. That's the real takeaway. If your goal is financial freedom, not just a big number, focus less on how impressive your net worth looks and more on how usable your money actually is. Because true wealth isn't what you own, it's what can support you when you decide to stop working. If this changed how you think about money, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Milo Monkey will be here quietly questioning the numbers everyone else takes at face value.